Good evening, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reisch, and this is Crime Talk, the most fact-driven, unbiased, true crime channel on the internet. Now, tonight, we have a lot to talk about. Obviously, we have the Dereck Chauvin trial going on, and we're going to give you the analysis that some people may not like it, but it's going to be the truth. And the prosecution may not like it either because it's kind of calling them out for not apparently wanting to seek the truth. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Ghislaine Maxwell, and then we're going to talk about your questions. This is your opportunity to ask the questions that you want to ask me, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Now, for those of you who maybe are here for the first time thinking, who is this Scott Reisch guy? Well, I am a practicing criminal defense attorney I started my 26th year doing this stuff. So I literally have handled just about every type of case that's out there. And I'm going to give you the facts. Yes, I am a criminal defense attorney. Do I like rooting for the underdog? Yes, I do. But this channel is about giving you the facts, presenting both sides of the argument. And particularly as we talk about the Dereck Chauvin case, let's take a look at it from a potential juror's point of view. Let's try not to make any judgments until we hear all the evidence in the case. Certainly, lots of themes have developed throughout that case, and we'll certainly talk about that. So like I said, I've been doing this for 26 years. We started this program a little over 2 years ago. It was my frustration of watching the evening news and listening to a news anchor talk about the proceedings, and specifically it was the Chris Watts case, and they got it all wrong. They didn't know the difference between an arraignment and a preliminary hearing or what the significance of that was in any way. So we put up a couple of videos. We had a couple of them really take off. We're like, hey, this could be something good. And we normally try to put up a video every day, Monday through Friday, with a weekly recap on Saturday. And last week when I went out of town, Wednesday through Sunday, I was still able to put out a video Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, out of town. But I didn't get a chance to do a video today. Well, one, because I knew we were kind of going live, but second, I was just so darn busy today. It's been a busy week. I was supposed to be in trial, and it's amazing. Actually, I was supposed to be in trial last week, but then it got continued because kind of something that happened in the Ghislaine Maxwell case where the prosecutors add charges at the last minute. I'll tell you all about my grievances, not on that particular case, but in general, when prosecutors do that, just drives me bonkers. And so anyway, we'll be in trial next week, do it all over again. Just seems like we were in trial a couple of weeks ago. But it's a serious case involving very significant penalties, so have to focus on that. Plus, in the meantime, take care of everything else and all the new stuff that comes in, all the little fires that, every time the phone rings, it's a fire. Nobody ever calls with good news. They only call with problems, but that's okay. After spending 5 days in Mexico, I'm completely charged up, ready to go, batteries on full charge. So let's talk about the Dereck Chauvin trial. All right, here we are, week 2, day 7. The theme of the day would be use of force. The prosecution continues to call more and more officers from the Minneapolis Police Department, as well as an expert in the use of force, a Los Angeles police sergeant, who basically said that, and they've all repeated this, that what Dereck Chauvin did by putting his knee on the neck of Mr. Floyd was not in the policies. It wasn't in the training manuals, and basically, kicking Mr. Chauvin under the bus. Now, as I've said, I am no fan of Dereck Chauvin. Okay, he is the epitome of what has been wrong with police forces for at least as long as I've been practicing law, 26 years. He's the guy that everybody hates, that every defense attorney knows is that guy, that police officer that maybe puts those handcuffs on just a little tighter, gets that little jab in when he thinks he can get away with it, pushes the limits just a little bit when he thinks he can. And I've said the biggest problem Dereck Chauvin's going to have is the video, obviously, of 9 minutes and 30 seconds. But it's that point where he's literally looking up at the camera and he just has that arrogant little smirk on his face that'll probably come back to bite him in some way when the verdict comes back. Whether it's the most serious charge or a lesser charge, we'll have to wait and see. But we're going to give everybody the presumption of innocence, and we're going to try to analyze this case, okay? And Dereck Chauvin's defense attorney, Mr. Erickson, he is doing a great job considering what he had to work with. I really do think that is good, particularly today. I thought the one highlight was when they had this Lieutenant Mercel, who was one of the Minneapolis use of force police officers, and he said, things weren't done. That's not the way you're supposed to do it. We're always supposed to, protect the neck and head, etc. But then he said on cross-examination that it could take less than 10 seconds for a person to become unconscious because of a neck restraint. And then Mr. Nelson said, and could allow Mr. Nelson to argue, that Mr. Chauvin's knee did not qualify as a neck restraint because it took so long for Mr. Floyd to lose consciousness. Okay? And as we've said before, a trial is not something where you just have this bam, home run, one witness, or every witness just hits it out of the park. It's little pieces from each testimony, each person's testimony, and then you all kind of put it together. I'm sure lots of people have seen it where, it's equivalent to a jigsaw puzzle. You put the little pieces together at the end, it spells out, guilty or not guilty, That's where that stands. I think he's done a very good job in basically saying, hey, these policies and circumstances, they're great. They're guidance. They're guidance as to what you should do, but it's not like a law. It's subject to change, and it's always subject to the circumstances. And Mr. Nelson got just about every one of the witnesses saying, hey, if I've got what the officer believes to be a hostile, dangerous crowd yelling at me, and I'm looking out and observing for my safety, the safety of my officers, it distracts from me focusing on the person that they have detained. So it's actually been very good, and Mr. Nelson, I think, has frankly been hitting it out of the park. Now, the other issue that came up today is there's a key witness in this case, and this key witness is Maurice Lester Hall. Now, he was seated in the passenger seat of Mr. Floyd's car when Minneapolis police officers approached him about the counterfeit $20 bill. Now, we've been saying all along that it was a $20 bill and it was a counterfeit bill. And early on, people were like, how do you know that? What does it matter? Well, that makes it for the whole purpose of making contact. You can't go, think about it, ladies and gentlemen. It's a $20 bill, but it's a federal offense to pass counterfeit money. It's not just, it's a $20 bill. Okay? It's a serious offense. And, the store worker at Cup Foods there was like, hey, they tried to pass the bill. It was bogus, comes out of my paycheck. I called the police. It was apparently a big enough deal for him to call the police because I'm sure it happens more frequently than not. I'm sure people come in and, try to shoplift in the store. And, if there's something that's preventable, he could have it taken out of his paycheck by his employer. Anyway, so we got this Maurice Lester Hall, and he's basically under subpoena by both the prosecution and the defense. And the significance of Mr. Hall is that in opening statements, the defense said, you're going to hear from Mr. Hall, and you're going to hear that he's the one that gave sold George Floyd his drugs. Mr. Hall, he's a drug dealer. Okay, let's call it for what it is. Mr. Hall is not this great upstanding citizen. He is not, I just happened to stop by Cub Foods on the way to work. No, they were out doing what people do to get high. They were partying. They were trying to make their way through the day. Let's face it, and if anybody denies it, you're not being intellectually honest whatsoever. Mr. Hall is his drug dealer. That was confirmed by Mr. Floyd's girlfriend, who testified that when Mr. Floyd obtained opioids, that he received them from Mr. Hall. The time that she was concerned that maybe she took something other than heroin or Percocets that she would get from Mr. Hall, she literally thought she was going to die. So more than likely, it was probably fentanyl, not fentanyl, fentanyl. As I learned the correct pronunciation of that the other day, and I'm mispronouncing it. So I should have known better. Anyway, and Mr. Hall said that he considered Mr. Floyd a confidant and mentor, like many in the community. And they knew each other back in Houston, but they'd reconnected through a pastor up there in Minneapolis. Now, let's not forget Mr. Hall. When the police arrived at the car, Mr. Hall provided a false name to the officers. His best friend, his mentor, is dying or may have already died by the time that they put him in the ambulance, and he gives a false name. Well, why is he going to do that? Well, because he already had warrants. He was trying to avoid being arrested because he had arrest warrants for felony possession of a firearm, felony domestic assault, and felony drug possession. Now, certainly Mr. Hall will give him the presumption of innocence. I think some of those matters were, in fact, resolved. He was given probation, and he messed it up, and he went back to Florida, and he's been extradited back to Minneapolis, and he's sitting in custody. And now his public defender is saying, Judge Cahill, please quash the subpoenas for Mr. Hall because he has a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, like we all do. The government cannot compel you to testify against yourself, right? So if the prosecution calls the witness and they're going to ask him questions about that day, it's prejudicial basically to both sides, probably more so the prosecution in this particular case, but you don't want witnesses taking the fifth on the witness stand. Okay, I've seen it. It's a cluster. You just don't want to have it. And attorneys cannot call a witness to the stand if they believe that they're going to ask questions that would invoke their right against self-incrimination, where they could do that. So in this particular case, Dereck Chauvin's attorney is saying, hey, Judge, I only want to ask him various questions, observations of what he saw. I'm not going to get into, did you sell drugs to George Floyd? Did you have a gun? Did you, give false information? Those are all statements that could be used against him. Now, of course, the prosecution, wants to bring in everybody who was an eye and ear witness to this incident, but now they don't really want to bring in Mr. Hall. Okay? He's under subpoena, but let's face it, they don't want him there. The reason why they don't want him there is because he and George Floyd were friends. They're out dealing drugs. They're using drugs. It doesn't paint a very good light of Mr. Floyd, the victim in the case. They're trying to paint a nice rosy picture that he was this martyr. He was the father of all these children. I think five children. And, he probably hadn't seen them in a while, hadn't paid much of child support. He was quite in arrears. But we don't want anybody to know that because, frankly, it's not relevant. And I get that from the defense side, not relevant. 99% of the time, I don't want them to know anything about my client's past history. But the victims does come in certain circumstances. And in this case, Mr. Hall, the prosecution says, hey, if he's going to invoke the fifth, basically, we don't think we're going to call him. It's just going to create too many issues, really going to be bad. And if you allow the defense to ask these questions of Mr. Hall, it's going to basically open up the door where we feel we're going to have to explain it, but then he's going to have to invoke the fifth and it's going to get ugly, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's the analysis that no one else is going to give you. If the prosecutor, right? Remember everybody, I'm the prosecutor, I'm the guy in the white hat, I'm the guy that's seeking justice for Floyd, seeking justice for the people of the great state of, or the city of Minneapolis. We're there to seek justice. You'd think they want to paint the whole story. Let's get the truth out there, right? We've called in every freaking person that has come in contact with George Floyd since Cup Foods, right? The clerk, the people, the police officers on that had some contact with him. They brought in the paramedics. They brought in people from the street. Oh my God, it was so terrible. Oh my God, we told him you're killing him. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. We've even heard from the girlfriend of George Floyd who said, Maurice is the guy. Maurice Hall is the guy that sells him drugs. And when he relapsed, who was he hanging out with? This Hall guy, right? And so the prosecution's absolutely happy to let this go, okay? They're completely happy with it. Which goes to the point. And this is what people don't think. Everyone thinks, oh, they're the prosecutor. They're there to seek the truth. They're there to seek justice. Oh my God, they're white hats. Believe everything they say. No. Just like the defense attorney on the other side of the room, Mr. Nelson, the prosecutors in this case are advocates. If their job was to seek the truth, and I've said this many, many times, if the job of the prosecutor was to seek the truth, the defense would never have to ask a single question. Think about that for a second. If the prosecutor's job was to seek the truth, the defense wouldn't have to get up and say, oh, but by the way, isn't this a fact? Oh, by the way, isn't this a fact that the prosecutor forgot to mention? Oh, isn't this the fact that you said this in your previous statement, witness, that you failed to mention on your direct examination? Okay? The prosecutors are not there to seek the truth. Yes, ethically, they're supposed to seek justice, blah, 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 right? That's what they say. The reality of it is they're advocates. They don't tell the part of the story that hurts their case. The defense has to deal with it. The prosecution tries to ignore it. Do you think they want to ignore Mr. Hall? Absolutely. And who has the one simple thing that they could do with a stroke of a pen so that Mr. Hall doesn't have to worry about invoking his right against self-incrimination? The prosecution doesn't have to worry about him asserting the fifth on the stand in front of the jury? The defense isn't limited to asking narrowly tailored questions that would not implicate the Fifth Amendment. What did you observe? Right? Oops. Fix my mic. What is the one simple thing? And who has the power to do it? The prosecutor. They could give Mr. Hall immunity. That would include basically saying anything that you say here today in court cannot be used against you in a prosecution against you. But we, as a prosecution, are here for the truth. We, for the prosecution, want the world to know the truth. they simply they give him a grant of immunity. And when you have a grant of immunity, you have to testify. If you don't testify, then you could be held in contempt. But it always kind of brings you back to the other thing. Remember, this case is being televised by the court. We're live streaming it to you all. Who wanted the case televised? It was the defense. Who didn't want it televised? It was the prosecution. Why? In what many people have called the greatest trial of the century, the greatest civil rights trial of the century, although it's only 20 years so far into it, that this is the most important case in people's lifetime, and the prosecution didn't want the case broadcast to the world to see. Why? For the exact same reason they don't want to call Mr. Hall to the stand. For the exact same reason they don't want to give Mr. Hall immunity. They're not interested in the truth. And I don't know exactly what the truth is, but I would certainly like to try and find it. And that's what we're supposed to do in a trial. And yet, it seems like the people that always say they're seeking the truth, they're seeking the justice, aren't there saying, let it come in. What do they have to lose other than it makes their client say, oh, by the way, because Mr. Hall had previously stated that George Floyd had fallen asleep in the car and they had difficulty waking him up. Why? Because he was on drugs, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm not trying to badmouth Mr. Floyd. Lots of people, we've all known people that become addicted to prescription pills like Mr. Floyd did. And when those prescription pills end, then they go to the street to look for the street narcotics to replace the prescription pills. And then they get addicted and they got to have more and they got to get more. We've all seen people, and I assure you in my practice, I've seen it destroy many, many a life. It doesn't mean that George Floyd was a bad man, but it's a fact. It's a fact that cannot be ignored. And we're trying to find out, and we still haven't seen the medical people yet. We are waiting with great anticipation as to the cause of death. That will be, in my opinion, the watershed moment. Did he use excessive force? Did he use too much force? Did he use the wrong hold? It is what it is. But did that cause the death? That's the point. And all this seems to be a lot of show, a lot of let's get out, let's play the video, let's throw another picture, Mr. Chauvin on Mr. Floyd's neck. I get it. But let's cut to the chase. We've heard from everybody on the street corner, but we don't want to have the guy who's George Floyd's best friend, who was with him that day, perhaps gave him drugs, perhaps knew what he took, how much he took. Somehow, that's not important. It is. And it's the facts. And people don't like the facts. People don't like the truth. What's that? Was it Grace Slick or something said that song? When you find out that the truth was nothing but a lie, is it just me, or does it seem like more and more we're finding out that we're just being absolutely lied to more and more and more, right? And I get accused of being cynical because somebody says, oh, this is what you have to do. Oh, really? Who? Who says I have to do that? What authority do they have to say that? Okay? Maybe that's just the way I was brought up. When I went to college, it was you question things. You question authority. You don't just say, oh, that's what they told me to do. I need to do it. They taught you how to think, not what to think. And it seems like today, people are more interested in what they're being told they have to think than how to think, like critically, right? Okay, they're saying something happened. What's the assumption of that argument? Well, let's take a look at it. Is it a faulty assumption? Is it correct? But nobody wants to engage in any intellectual conversation today. All it is, well, if you don't agree with me, you're a racist. And if you're a racist, I can't talk with you because you're mean and you need to be canceled. But the reality of it is they're facts and people are still going to talk about them. And your righteous indignation isn't going to be enough to change the facts, because maybe not now, not 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but the facts will come out. Think about all those cases where people have gone to prison based upon what people believe to be true. And it turned out to be completely wrong. And sometimes it took a little time for it to come out, maybe a trial, maybe it's 5 years. Some people 10, 20. You hear about these cases of people on death row. The state gives them hyper due process, the best attorneys they can get, and the system still railroads it through. And they want to do it in a cloak of secrecy. I mean, I think Judge Cahill is a very good judge. I'm very impressed with him. I wish we had judges like him in my jurisdiction. It would be an honor to practice in front of this guy. He's smart. He's trying to make sure that both sides receive a fair trial. But it seems like today a lot of people are more concerned about getting their retention vote than it is to being a judge, calling balls and strikes, not caring how things come out. So, all right. I don't know about you, but I feel better. All right. Next, Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Ever heard of her? Oh my gosh. She's been arrested since July of 20. So you got July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April. She's been in there 9 months and 4 days. 9 months and 4 days for the Ghislaine Maxwell suicided watch. We haven't done that in a while. But anyway, she was supposed to have a hearing. Okay, so obviously she got indicted, right? Everybody knows what she got indicted for. She's the accused right-hand man, woman for that guy named Jeff. And he's the, let's face it, he's accused of doing really bad things, and she apparently was along for the ride, maybe drove the bus, that kind of thing. Not good. She's in a spot, all right? And all her money, all her connections haven't been able to get her out of prison. I'm sorry, not prison. She is in pretrial detention. They've been unable to get her out of pretrial detention, and not for a lack of trying. And they have a trial date in July. Now, that's not that far away. And it turns out the prosecution has done a superseding indictment, okay? And for those of you who don't know, superseding means to replace, to come after something first. What's gone?
Reading the comments.
Oh. Something bad? No. Anyway, so superseding indictment replaces the previous indictment. You get indictment, you get first superseding indictment, second superseding indictment. Because an indictment, you can't just make changes like, ooh, we made an error, we'll just make a pen change to that. You have to go back and present new evidence. And I had a case, I swear to God, superseding means to replace. That's just the way it is. Had a guy who was charged with murder, plus lots of other things. They indicted him, and then they did a superseding indictment, but they didn't include in the superseding indictment all the original charges, just the one that they added. So it was like 2 indictments. Never had I seen that before. Never have I ever seen that again. And I raised the issue saying, Judge, we should be only going into trial on 1 count. I raised it. I re-raised it. I raised it in motion for judgment of acquittal. I raised it as trial. I raised it. And our, appellate court's like, well, he's a really bad guy. And he did some really bad things. I mean, the jury convicted him and all. And, why did the defense want to get so wrapped around this technicality of whether it should have been 1 charge or they should have re-indicted with all? Well, that's the way they do it. But, it's called the son of a bitch rule. You all may have never heard about that, but that's the way it is, right? If your client has a really good issue, and this works at the trial level, appellate court level as well, it's called the son of a bitch rule. If your client looks like a real son of a bitch, they're going to find a way to not give him any relief on appeal. And my guy, they probably thought was a son of a bitch. And, they just ignored that issue. Like, how do you ignore that? I mean, it's like dismissing the first 6 charges and only leaving the 7th. Judge, why are we doing the first 6? They've dismissed those because they brought this new document forward. I mean, it's only due process, Judge. I mean, what? Anyway, so Ghislaine Maxwell, they have a superseding indictment. Add 2 counts, expand the date range by 4 years, right? So for the last year, the defense attorneys are focusing their investigation, their analysis for legal motions to this particular time frame. And now the prosecution expands it by 4 years. Basically, it's like starting all over again. You got to file new motions. You got to reinvestigate. Costs money. It costs time. Because somebody at the government didn't have their act together the first time through. It is nothing more frustrating than that. When a prosecutor, and you know what that is? That is, in my terms, that's county court deputy BS. It's freaking amateur hour. All right. You get it. Let's say you have a simple case. It's like, let's say it's a little DUI. And it's, they pull them over for weaving lane and then it's a DUI. And your client says, I'm going to trial. Like, let's go. Right. And so the DA the night before trial, who finally looks at the case, it's, a year old, and he says, you know what, he didn't have a seatbelt on. I'm going to add a seatbelt violation. And he didn't produce his insurance card, so we're going to add proof of insurance as well. And, just piles on this petty stuff because they finally looked at it and like, ooh, we should add this and, it'll help something stick. It's called freaking amateur hour, right? You file the case, you add the charges. Now, I guess sometimes you need to amend a date or something, but you usually realize that pretty quick in the case. You don't do it 3 months before trial when you've turned over 3 million documents, okay? Once again, no fan of Ghislaine Maxwell, probably a horrible human being deep down inside, let's face it. Did she know what was going on? Of course she probably did, all right? But we're going to give her that presumption of innocence. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, ladies and gentlemen. If we, as citizens, as defense counsel right here, who's in the trenches every day saying, government, no, you can't do that. No, that's not right. Lets the government railroad guilty people. Guess what? They'll start doing it to innocent people. So just when you think somebody's a son of a bitch and just, get a rope, whatever, hang them high, it just, you got to give them due process. You have to give them due process, ladies and gentlemen. That's just the way it is. And Ghislaine Maxwell, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen with her case. She'll probably spend a better part of her life in prison, if not die in prison, assuming she's convicted. But come on, government. You've had years to prepare this case. You had years to go after old Jeffrey, and you didn't do it. You screwed the pooch on that one, didn't you? And then you come after her because the political heat, right? Why didn't they charge her when they charged old Jeffrey? Why wait till he's dead and 2 years later? Why don't they go after all the other people that they know are associated, that were there at the little compound? Because there's 2 systems of government out there, ladies and gentlemen. There's 2 systems in this system. If you are the protected elite, you get a pass. That's the way it works. If you're part of the elite, if you maybe have the right last name, the family, they have a very powerful family. I mean, they're such a good, let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, everybody, I don't care if, you're the richest man in the world or you're the poorest man in the world. Everybody's got issues. Everybody has clay feet. Nobody is beyond reproach. Like I said, I don't get starstruck by anybody these days because for 26 years, I've been seeing people that are supposedly high and mighty in positions of power and authority, and I know, for lack of a better term, how fucked up they are. So, I don't get too impressed with anybody in power. I certainly don't get impressed by titles. Just not a big deal to me. And there's two systems of government. So if you're in that perceived elite, maybe you're a politician, you get a pass. Oh, we're not going to do it. I mean, let's talk. We've talked about this before, right? Why is no one in Washington, D.C. ever prosecuted? Because they know they're all guilty. And if they start prosecuting this guy, then he's going to tell about this guy. And then they're going to prosecute him. And, you know, who knows where that could lead? It could all lead back to the same people. And so, you know, it's just the way it is. And I don't know why I'm so fired up tonight. But, you know, let's give, you know, whether it's Dereck Chauvin or Ghislaine Maxwell, give them a freaking fair trial. And, you know, judges, if you're on the federal bench, you have a job for life. Unless you get impeached for some sort of misconduct, which rarely happens, the point of having a lifetime appointment is that you should be able to make decisions and not have to worry about your judicial career in the future. So why don't you live by that and say, I'm going to do what the law says, not what I think is justice, not what I think the law should be, not the way I think the law should be developing. Just read the damn law and make the decision. If you think the law should be changed, you put it in your opinion that the Congress or the state legislatures should go change the law, right? They're the ones that create the law, you know, back the old civic stuff, right? 3 branches of government. Anyway, all right, enough of that. Let's get to your questions. But before we do that, Frank, you got that quick little break there? Let's take the quick break. I'm going to get Please go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, sign up for a background subscription service. You'll be happy you did. If there's anyone out there you were ever curious about what was in their background, now is the time to do it. If you're going to get involved with somebody, now is the time to do it. When you go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, you put in the name, literally millions of public records are searched, and a report is generated. And it's going to give you a report. If they have multiple social media accounts, you're going to find it. If they have multiple phone numbers, multiple email addresses, it's going to be found. And more importantly, you're going to get information regarding criminal history. Hopefully the person you're searching has none whatsoever. But if it's there, it's going to be found. You're going to get everything you'd want to know, whether you're going into business or whether you're going into a personal relationship. You're going to be able to find out the information you want to know. So go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, sign up today. You'll be happy you did. All right, we're back. Just taking a sip from my Crime Talk mug. If you'd like to get one, hit the little link below. They'll have it to you, I don't know, in less than a week or so, right? All right. Let's take the questions that people have here in the chat. Now, we never asked for it, but I do say if there is a super chat, we will, it pops up and I can see it much more clearly than if it's a regular one. Let's see here. Michael, thank you. Glad you're back. Or I'm sorry, Michelle. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle, for that super chat. Yeah, you know, it's so weird. I used to travel all the time, and then COVID hit, right? And then you don't travel anywhere. Even Crime Talk 1 was down for a little while because we had to get an engine in it. And so even when I flew to cross country, it was like work. So I haven't really done anything. So when my trial went away, I told the lovely Miss Kristen, who is also trapped at home, and we hadn't traveled in literally over a year. I'm like, we got to get away, or I could possibly hurt somebody, right? Not literally, but figuratively. And I'm telling you, it is amazing what a couple of days near the beach, the water will do for you. The ocean has a medicinal effect. It just charges up the batteries. Makes you feel great. All right, Jimmy, thank you for that super chat as well. All right, so we get this question all the time. Who is that handsome devil right there next to me? Is he a family member? No. But who is that guy? I mean, look at him. Uniform, got his Eagle Globe and anchor up there. That, my friends, is Lieutenant General Chesty Puller. Probably one of the greatest Marines ever to have served, all right? We all know you have the Medal of Honor. And below the Medal of Honor for the Navy and Marine Corps is the Navy Cross, right? So you got to be pretty heroic dude, tough dude, right? Even to get one and live to tell about it, you're in pretty limited company, right? Most Navy Crosses, they're awarded posthumously, just like the Medal of Honor. A lot of them awarded posthumously, i.e., you died. He had 5. He had 5 Navy Crosses. The man was a stud. And, he was in, World War II, Korea, and they didn't exactly hand out medals like they do today. Not trying to minimize it, but you had to do something pretty darn spectacular to get a medal, all right? He's a stud, all right? When he was surrounded at the Chosin Reservoir in Korea, what did he say? Did he say surrender? No. Did he say, oh my God, let's just get in the fetal position and give up? Oh, hell no. What did he say about those little communists surrounding him at that time? He said, I've got them right where I want them. And he charged through the lines, did a fighting retreat, because there is no word as surrender, and made it back to fight yet another day. So that's who that individual is. We get that question quite a bit, so I'll hopefully that answers it to you. Let me see here. I got. I think they should clear the swamp and let us have our rights back. Ladies and gentlemen, it's all about liberty, freedom, right? When I said there's 2 systems of justice, if your name is this or you're connected to this person, maybe you get a little extra push or something along those lines. Our country was founded on the complete opposite of that, right? In England, why did people want to leave, England and Europe to get away? Because everybody had taken all the land. It was already claimed by the kings and the knights and the nobles. And if you were just a little serf, you had nothing, right? So they came here to America, a dangerous ride. And if they made it, if they lived, they made it to the shores of America, maybe they pushed out west, all for obviously a hope of a better life, to own some land themselves, something they would probably have little chance to do in Europe at the time. And they came here. And it didn't matter who your daddy was, who your last name was, who you know, who you think you know. It was all about if you were willing to work hard and determined to succeed, you were going to succeed and you could reap the benefits of that. All right? This country was founded on liberty. Look at the Constitution. Look at the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, right? The 10 amendments that had to be included, otherwise the states would not ratify the Constitution. Each and every one of those first 10 amendments is a limit on the government. And everybody acts like everything is new. Yes, our founding fathers were very smart men. It wasn't like they said, let's sit around and do this. No, they had looked at everything that every tyrant had ever done in the history of all their readings and all the history that they knew about individually. They said, What is it that all the tyrants and the kings and the nobles have done to the little guy each and every time to maintain their power? Right? And they said, we're not going to stand for that. Oh my gosh, where's my Constitution?
No, we brought it back.
Anyway, so the first, what's obviously the first one? The First Amendment. Freedom of religion. Why? Because if the king didn't like your religion, he'd tell you you couldn't practice it anymore. Freedom of speech. If the king didn't like what you were saying, he threw you in jail. The freedom of the press. If the king didn't like what you were saying, if you were asking those questions, if you were talking about the questions that make people feel uncomfortable, how dare you, particularly the king, the people in power, then he took away the newspaper and shut it down. The right to assemble, peacefully assemble, right? The right to go protest. Think about the First Amendment, ladies and gentlemen. It's a limitation on the government. Nobody in government gets up and says, we should give some freedom back to the people. And I guess there's maybe a few people that maybe say that. Maybe if you're a libertarian, Ayn Rand, okay? Maybe there's a few in government that want to give it back to the people, but most people in government don't. They want to expand their power. They want to expand their bureaucracies. That's what they want to do. That's what gives them their existence, right? The Second Amendment, what was the whole limit on that? Well, if the king didn't like what you were doing and he thought you were going to revolt, he'd take away your weapons so you couldn't fight him. Why do you think the Second Amendment's there, ladies and gentlemen? It's a limitation on the government so they can't come and seize your weapons. Why? Because every tyrant in the world before our founding fathers had done the same thing. It's not like it's anything new. Everybody acts like it's all brand new. We've never seen it before. If you read a little history, you find out people have been doing it for thousands of years. The Third Amendment, not a very popular one anymore, but, quartering of troops, right? Not a big problem we have to worry about. But once again, it was significant enough at the time because what were the British doing? Oh, we need to sleep here tonight. We're going to take over your home and we're going to take your cows, right? Then you got the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable searches and seizures. What can't the government do? Unreasonably search and seize you. And if they are going to search you, they need to be able to have a warrant to a neutral magistrate to say, yes, I believe that a crime has been committed and there is something of specificity in that house or object that they are searching for. Not just a general warrant, which is illegal. That's, hey, we want to go in and take a look around. We're not sure what we're looking for, but we'll know when we find it. Just trust us. We're the government. We're here to help you, right? Don't do that. What is under the Fourth Amendment? Unreasonable. People didn't like that when the king came in with his soldiers. If he thought that maybe you were preparing to arm yourselves and go have, go down to the newspaper and write a paper critical of the king. He'd come search for you to make a criminal out of you. Sound familiar? A little bit, doesn't it? If we make enough stuff illegal, everyone will be a criminal, so we'll always have control over everybody. Interesting. Then we should go to the Fifth Amendment. Right? Remember we talked about the Third Amendment, they'd come and take your cow? Well, guess what? The government they can't take your life, liberty, or property without due process of law. They can't come and take your cow, sleep in your house. They have to pay you for it. The government just can't come take your stuff. Another limitation on the government. Why? Because people in power have tried to do that. What do people still try to do in power? Take your shit without paying for it. The government does, right? Absolutely. Fifth Amendment, right against self-incrimination. Mr. Hall, remember the king could make you show up and testify, even if it was maybe not so good for you. But he would probably do it, with a gun to your head or a knife in your back and say, testify, tell me what you did was wrong. You confessed. Tell me. All limitations on the government because the people in government have done it before. People in power don't like to give up their power, and they're certainly not going to give it back to the people from where it originated. Bottom line. Sixth Amendment, right? Right to counsel, right to subpoena witnesses. Why? Oh, that's right, because the king wouldn't let you have somebody. Maybe you weren't very good at speaking for yourself. Maybe you weren't very smart. Maybe you couldn't read. Maybe you had a stutter. Maybe you just had anxiety when you got up in front of more than two people that you knew. Well, so you hired an advocate to talk for you, but the king wouldn't allow that unless he wanted it to, unless he was going to allow it, if he permitted it. They said no here in the United States. We're not signing the Bill of Rights unless and until these restrictions on the government are included. Because we know every time somebody gets in government, and what do they do all the time? I don't care what political party they're part of. What do they do? Try to get around each and every one of the limitations put upon them. They do it in a courtroom. They do it on the floor of the Congress, the state legislators, every time. And they may change their tactics. They may say, well, it's something else. We're not doing that. We're just limiting this just a little bit. Don't worry. Don't worry, right? Trust us. We're here to help you. Eighth Amendment, obviously kind of big in the sense of cruel and unusual punishment, because the king, used to be able to torture you before he killed you, those kind of things. Bad. I think I skipped the Seventh Amendment. Oh, that's right. The Seventh Amendment extends right to a jury trial in federal civil cases. That's important. Have an impartial jury. That's kind of important, included in the Sixth Amendment, right to a speedy and public trial. Right to have a lawyer. That's kind of important. Eighth Amendment, excessive bail and fines. Can't do that. Cruel and unusual punishment. Can't do that. Why? Because people in power, if they didn't like you, they'd throw you in jail and make so you couldn't get out. Ninth Amendment states that the listing specific rights in the Constitution does not mean that people do not have other rights that have not been spelled out. And, of course, the 10th Amendment that is all but dead. The 10th Amendment says that the federal government only has those powers delegated in the Constitution. If it isn't listed, it belongs to the states or to the people. When was the last time you heard a court make a 10th Amendment argument? Not that often. When have you actually seen, maybe in COVID a little bit, right? Some of the states are like, hey, you can't tell me what to do. We're a state. You can't tell us what to do. You don't have any authority to make us wear masks or give us a mask mandate. Your authority only extends to federal land. You're a king. You're not your president. You're not king, right? But most states don't do that. Most states do not assert that, hey, you can't do that. That's a power specifically preserved to the states. You can't interfere in that. But once again, we've got around that too. Now, if anything is engaged in interstate commerce, it's a federal crime. We can regulate it. We can prosecute you for it. All right. Karen, how long do you think it'll take to get a jury in the Vallow trial? I don't know. And I've said I'm going to do this soon. We got to get out there. We have to jump in. Frank, Julie, and I, even if it's for a day trip, we need to jump in Crime Talk 1. Maybe we'll take the lovely Miss Kristen and Miss Winnie the Bulldog, and maybe just go like a Friday, Saturday, and go get a lay of the land, see what people are thinking out there, see if somebody can get a fair trial. It sounds like just about everybody's heard of the case. The question then becomes, have they formed an opinion? I was a little surprised how quickly they were able to get a jury in the Chauvin matter. What did it take? 7 days, I think. That's pretty good, considering the fact that, people nearly burned the city down because of the George Floyd case. So to find people that did know about it, probably, at least hopefully they're being honest for it is on it. I mean, that's what we want. We want every side to have a fair trial, right? Win, lose, or draw. At the end of the day, you want both sides in a trial to have a fair trial. There's nothing better for an attorney to be able to look to the client and say, hey, man, we won, we lost, but we had a fair trial, okay? Even if you lost. Hey, I'll be honest with you, man, the judge gave us a fair trial. We got everything. The jury just wasn't buying what we were selling, okay? That's the best thing that anybody can ask for, and that's what we need in this particular case. Let the truth come out. I mean, seriously, give Mr. Hall immunity. Why not? If you are the prosecutor for justice, then let the facts come out, okay? George Floyd, I am sorry for his family. I'm sorry for Mr. Floyd that he has passed away. But we need to know and find out and not speculate. We need to have a jury of 12 citizens in this particular case deliberate and decide what was the cause of death. Was it Dereck Chauvin, and that's it? Or was it because of his health conditions? Was it because his health conditions with a combination of a lot of serious freaking drugs? Right? Fentanyl, ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about you're taking a freaking aspirin here. The prosecution knew that was a problem in their opening statement. They tried to address it. Now, Mr. Floyd is going to have some really high levels of fentanyl in his system and maybe a little methamphetamine. One picks you up, the other one brings you down. It's the classic upper and downer kind of thing. You're just barely making it through the day. Let's call it for what it was. He had relapsed. He fell off the wagon. His girlfriend said he fell off the wagon, that he was doing really well. And when he does, who's he's around? Mr. Hall. We've all known somebody that had an issue, right? What do? They fall off the wagon when they get around the same people. How many times have I had clients that, hey, I think you could do really well. Just don't go back to the same crowd. Like, yeah, you're right, Scott, man. That's the best advice. I'm going to do that. I'm going to stay away. And what do? They go home back to the same block, to the same group of friends, doing the same crap, and they wonder why the same crap keeps happening to them. Sometimes past performance is indicative of future results. If you have a history of making very poor decisions, sometimes it takes a little more work than just one day saying, you know what, I think I'm going to start making some good decisions. It doesn't happen just like that. Usually it's called the law, the life of hard knocks. So we'll see. We just want everybody to get a fair trial. All right. Wow. Can't believe how fast it goes by. Let's see. Illicit fentanyl. It was not someone's prescribed pill. They were homegrown. Well, they probably came from Mexico or China. That's where most of this stuff is coming from these days. You say, wow, Scott, are you an expert on this? No. But what is the drug flavor of the month that is going on here where people are getting prosecuted when somebody dies? It is fentanyl. Somebody died. Find out who gave them the pills. Let's go prosecute them. Where are the drugs coming from? Mexico. And usually they start out in China. And they come here and they're pure stuff. And they're evil. They're dangerous. Don't use it. Don't take other people's prescription drugs. But certainly don't take a prescription drug that somebody says that they're going to sell you on the street. You don't know what it is. That little Percocet could in fact be fentanyl, and you're going to die. I don't know how else to say it any straightforward than that. So, Marsabella, I think he'll get convicted of manslaughter. Yeah, maybe third degree homicide. What's the drugs that he ingested tested? Well, that was what was in his system, was the fentanyl and the methamphetamines, right? We talked about, the prosecutor's like, oh, he just has a tolerance. Ignore that big high number. That wasn't enough to kill him. Yeah, it was. But he had a tolerance to it, so it wasn't enough to kill him. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. And mark my word, that's what both the prosecution, witnesses, I will bet you a steak dinner that the prosecution will say, yes, that's enough to kill him with his heart condition. I certainly would anticipate the defense expert saying that as well. I'm telling you, this case isn't over. If I had to score the fight just because obviously the sheer number of witnesses coming in over and over again, if I was scoring the fight like it was a boxing or UFC, not that I know how to score that, but if somebody's getting a good punch, we know it. I would say the prosecution's only ahead by a couple of points at this point. I think the defense, Mr. Nelson, never met the man, don't know him, never heard of him before this case. He is doing a very, very good job considering what he has to work with. A city that pretty much hates his client. A lot of bad facts, which is the video of him, Chauvin, sitting on Mr. Floyd's neck. And that George Floyd is dead and everybody knows it. And, there are riots everywhere. And everybody knows that if he's found not guilty of something, Minneapolis will probably burn. Other cities will probably burn. I'm sure the jurors have figured that out by now. I'm sure their families have figured that out by now. So, they're probably telling them, just find him guilty of something, just something, so we'll see. Like I said, it's not over yet. But I think this Mr. Hall thing, I think it could get interesting if the judge allows the defense to call him and only ask him questions about the observation, because it's going to be curious what the prosecution asks him. So we'll see. All right, my friends, my subscribers, thank you very much for watching. We are rapidly approaching 175,000 subscribers. Not there yet, but thank you, because it wouldn't be possible without you. So if you haven't already subscribed, would you please do so? And then hit that little bell so that you receive notifications as well. And then we can continue to have these conversations. I'm sorry I did not get to all of your questions tonight, but I don't know. I just kind of got on a roll, and that's the way it went this evening. But if you'd like to continue the conversation, guess what you can do? You can become a Patreon member if you haven't done so already. You can join for as little as $5. We send you some cool stuff. We try to send out more cool stuff, or do it before we send it out on YouTube, so that you all can have it for being a Patreon member. We appreciate that. So we're going to go there in just a few minutes. And Frank, the hardest working man in show business, is going to send everybody a link in Patreon, and then you'll be able to link and join us. And in addition to that, guess what? You can call. That's right. We have a call-in number. We can take like 10 calls backed up, and we will take each and every one of them. Sometimes it starts off fast, sometimes it's a little slow, but always a good conversation. And hey, where else can you talk to an attorney and ask legal questions for only $5 a month? I can't think of a single place other than right here on Patreon. And one more thing. For those of you listening on the podcast, because don't forget, you can always listen to us on the podcast at Crime Talk with Scott Reisch. You can download that at Apple and all those other places. And I think we're still like in the top 100 of all true crime podcasts. I haven't even looked this week, but we think we were the week before last. We were, I think, 80 something. But in all honesty, I'm a pretty competitive person, and I want to be number one, okay? So download it, listen to it, watch it on YouTube, and then go listen to it in the car or wherever on your podcast. Who knows? We all may just learn something, right? Come to some new perspective. You just never know. Not trying to convince anyone to believe anything. I only want people to look at the facts and be intellectually honest about the facts. And one more thing about being a Patreon. That's right. The Magic 8 Ball. We come up with a question to ask the Magic 8 Ball. And to date, I do not think that the Magic 8 Ball has ever been wrong. I think somebody would correct me if I made that mistake, but I don't think anybody has. But if I do, it'll happen that way. So let me know. Let's see. What can rectify matters when jury ignores evidence and acquits based on some sort of emotion? Example, Lizzie Borden or O.J. Simpson. Well, that would be jury nullification. The jury can completely ignore the law, find somebody guilty if they think that it is unjust. That is their right to do so. You're not going to get a jury instruction on it because we like people to follow the law. One of the instructions that the judge will give the jury is that you must follow the law. If you don't understand it, you don't like it, your job is not here to change it. Once again, that's the legislator's job. Your job is to follow the law and apply the facts heard on the witness stand or admitted into evidence that apply that to the law. That's it. The prosecution has proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt. It is each and every juror's solemn oath and obligation to find the defendant guilty. However, if the prosecution has failed to prove their case to just one element of each charge beyond a reasonable doubt, then it is the juror's solemn oath and obligation to say not guilty. They should not worry about punishment. They should not worry about the consequences in any way. They simply have to make up their mind. So I ask you all in the comments below, or join us on Patreon, do you think reasonable doubt has been raised thus far? I don't know if you could unequivocally say at this point that it was only Dereck Chauvin that caused the death of George Floyd. I don't think we'll ever be able to actually know that. So, anyway, so if the jury does ignore the evidence and acquits, that's their prerogative. I don't think the jury's going to do that. If I was a betting man, I think they find him guilty of something, maybe the lowest felony. I think it's the third-degree murder. Maybe the manslaughter. We'll see. I don't know. I would love. I know why the judge isn't putting the jurors on there, but I would love to be able to see the jurors react to the evidence thus far in the courtroom. But they haven't done that. We'll never see it, which is fine because the jurors are entitled to such. Their deliberations are obviously secret and private, and they can say what they want or as little as they want. But bottom line, that's it. All right. Please, that's all we have for tonight. Subscribe, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. Follow Miss Winnie the Bulldog on TikTok because, frankly, she has more subscribers and followers there. And let's make Miss Winnie the Bulldog, let's make her TikTok famous, all right? She's by far the cutest bulldog of all the animals out there. Just saying. Take a look. All right. That's all we have for tonight. For our Patreon members, we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Have a wonderful night. Thanks for joining us.